Welcome to Breathing Underwater's Musicast. I am Dan, and this is
Dave.
This is episode number 13. This is also, like our last episode, going to be in a regular format. These are going to be popping up from time to time. I'm going to call this Odds and Ends episode because there's just been a lot of news and concert attendings and other things that have happened. So we're going to skip the usual format, and we're just going to talk about a bunch of stuff. So let's just dive right in. I think the first thing I want to talk about, since it's fresh in my mind, is the fact that I went to a concert last night, and I want to get that out of my system. So last night, I drove to the Mecca of Jerry Falwell land in Lynchburg, Virginia. First of all, I was really interested and a little off-put by the fact that this tour was going through somewhere like way out in the boonies, Lynchburg, as opposed to Richmond, Virginia, which is, you know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, urban hub of Virginia. And I was just confused about why you would put a show way out in the country instead of a place where it would obviously have a bigger attendance. But that's the way it worked out, and I drove a couple hours out in the country, and I saw Head PE and Mushroom Head and American Head Charge, which I know sounds like the new metal tour from hell, but first of all, I went to just see Head PE, because I've been a longtime fan. That Dave, you got me into them originally, because well, here's a quick history about us and Head PE. First time I heard them was on Korn. They put out Follow the Leader. They had like an extra bonus disc that came with it. I think like if you got it at Best Buy or something, had a bonus disc of a bunch of bands that Korn was trying to give a break to. It included bands like Kilgore. It was a bunch of new metal stuff that was coming up, but it did introduce me to some stuff like Kidney Thieves was on there. Had Incubus's New Skin when Science was out, who also was on the Family Values tour that year, and a bunch of other like new metal bands. But one of them was Head PE. Was okay with the song that was on there. It was Serpent Boy from the first album, but then we saw them open at a big Fear Factory tour when Fear Factory was touring for Obsolete. This was like '99, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. The System of a Down, that was that with Fear Factory 2 later on?
Okay, so this was the tour. It was Spineshank, Head PE, System, and Fear Factory.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and at the time, I remember Jason had like a demo tape from System, and I thought they were okay, but I thought, you know, Sarge was a really weird singer. I didn't really get it, and I remember it was that show that like got me into System because
yeah,
I thought they were awesome. But I really went to see Spineshank and Fear Factory. And then I remember at that show, I thought Head PE was horrible, and I thought they were like the worst example of new metal. I thought they were totally ripping off of like Limp Bizkit, you know, with like the hip hop metal and the DJ and like and all that stuff. But it was after they put out Broke. I remember you got me into Broke, and that was ever since then. We've both been big Head PE fans, and even though they've definitely become like, I think like Jared, I don't know if he goes by MCUD anymore, but he's like the only founding member left in the band, right?
Oh, sure.
I'm pretty sure. I think maybe the DJ is still the same guy, but I can't tell because he used to have like a big beard and stuff. He doesn't anymore. But other than that, I think it's a brand new band, and like it's a totally different kind of vibe from what they used to, you know, do the rap metal kind of, you know, new metal thing. But now they're way more of like a punk metal reggae funk like fusion like niche band, you know, and they only really tour around like Southern California anymore, and like that the Southwest, like they never come around, which is why I made such a point to go see them even way out in the boonies. And it turned out to be totally worth it because they were amazing, but I'll get to that in a second. I was surprised because it was a small crowd. It was pretty small. There was maybe 200 people or less there, and it was a big place. It held like, could have held easily maybe like 1,000 people, but they were, you know, seemed like pretty much my crowd, like a lot of metalheads. I missed the first couple opening bands, who I have no idea who they were, even what they were called, but I got there right before American Head Charge went on, and I don't know if anybody even remembers them, but I saw them open for Slayer in I think it was 2001 in the Roseland Ballroom in New York, and I thought they were just god awful. And they to me were like the perfect example of everything that was wrong with new metal. When new metal, you know, started out as like a response to kind of I guess it was like a response to when grudge got overblown and metal itself, like thrash, had kind of lost its steam, and it was just like a natural progression of bands were doing something different. And, Korn and Deftones
Sort of minimal.
were integrating like hip hop, and they were just taking the genre to somewhere new. And at the time, I think it was a totally legitimate thing. And I think the way that a lot of people are looking back, nostalgically on hair metal and stuff now, I think people are going to be doing that with new metal, even though I think it's been too soon. It's not early enough yet for people to appreciate it for being like the novelty that it was. But what bugs me right now, like currently, is where everybody in the metal community refers to new metal, with like a crucifix up, like, oh my god, new metal is like this horrible thing. Like, you can't even mention.
They mention it with disdain.
Yeah, like it ruined metal or something like that, and it bugs me because people don't give any credit to the fact that it was a legitimate movement that had a purpose, that people did it for a reason. It was a response to something, just like every subgenre is like comes out of either like an antithesis or like a growing upon a previous genre that was losing steam or run its course or whatever, or people were taking genres they liked and put them together. That's called creation. That's called evolution. And people just like act like new metal was this horrible thing, and I understand because of bands like what American Head Charge represents, where they happened later as a response to new metal getting big, and then all these bands came out with like two guitarists with like seven strings or down-tuned guitars or whatever, and all these like chuggy riffs and like super like mid-tempo albums. They never like broach that, and like the singer will like do a little bit of rapping and like nasally singing, and they'll have a DJ and like all that standard crap. But that was all mechanized after people did it for their own unique reasons. And what I thought it was funny though in American Head Charge, like they weren't horrible, they were just kind of bleh. They were just there. Just every song sounded like the same mid-tempo sludgy crap.
I cannot place one of their songs. I don't know them.
You wouldn't recognize them, I don't think. And even if you heard them, you'd be like, okay, this sounds like a million other bands. I can name a couple bands right off the top of my head that they sound exactly like. Like there was a band called Endo, but they just sound like every other late new metal band that came out that were like on the border of being almost really heavy, and the singer kind of screamed, but it was more like a shout, and it just wasn't like. You could tell that they were kind of playing it safe, where they like this could almost be on the radio, which it's the equivalent of all this like Nickelback hard rock crap now, where it's like sort of aggressive but not really,
Yeah.
and it's kind of radio friendly, but it still appeals to the harder crowd. But anyway, like I just thought it was funny because when they came out, they're like, oh, this is one of our new songs off our new album, and I'm like, okay, it's 2012. It's like this genre has been gone for almost like 10 years now. Nobody cares about new metal anymore, and yet like even their brand new stuff sounds exactly like their old stuff. And it was like, I don't know how they still have a record deal. But anyway, so they were what they were. And then Mushroomhead came out, and even though Mushroomhead, I can't really speak for them. I've never liked them. I've only heard a little bit of their stuff, and it just didn't really sit with me well. But they, as performers, they were pretty awesome. Like I didn't know that they put on such a like performance art show. It was like seeing Rammstein or something without the pyrotechnics. But I mean, I know there's that big controversy about the Slipknot versus Mushroomhead thing and who did it first, and like did Slipknot just rip off of Mushroomhead and then get big, and should they be given more credit? I don't know all the details about that. I know that Mushroomhead or like somebody close to their circle put out some whiny documentary that was supposed to like unveil all of the theft that Slipknot did, but to me that just seems like they were so losers.
Nobody cared when that came out,
Yeah, you do remember that?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if anybody saw it. I never heard anything about it except for like a trailer, and then it was gone. But and just like Slipknot, they had like extra percussionist up front. They had like a DJ guy, and they infused a bunch of different styles. They had like some hip hop. They had definitely more like thrashy double bass metal. They had like new metal, the chuggy open chord stuff. Man, the one thing that didn't sit with me was the guy that, other than the fact that all their songs kind of sounded the same, they all had the same kind of structure where it's like, heavy, chuggy, maybe some double bass like verses. you're almost like, yeah, like this is, this is good. I'm getting into it. And then the chorus sets in, and it's always the same chorus of like that whiny, nasally, singy, new metally, or even that current hard rock style of like, "Rah," and it just,
Yeah,
it just ruins it to me. It just like, why?
Corey and like the singer VOD are the few who can sing and metal well these days.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was listening to Blood Simple the other day, and I was like, Tim Williams is one of the only singers that gets the singing, screamy dynamic right, because he has such a unique voice, and he does something different like every song. He doesn't just It's not the same. He doesn't just scream the same exact way and then sing the same exact way in every song. It's like he varies it up. He does different inflections. Like, he's so talented.
My assessment with this singing is like it's not like a singing to make it sound like, good or pretty. It sounds like a descent into madness. That's how I describe his singing, not just his screaming.
Well, I've always said that metal is a legitimate genre because it explores human insanity. So
Explores the shadow side of human emotional expression through music.
Which is a legitimate side, It's like people want to pretend it's not there, but it's there. Everybody has a dark side.
I tell you, I always thought of Slipknot as like the shadow side of nu metal. Although they're not big fans of nu metal nowadays, but they were like the un-nu metal band. That's what I loved about them.
Well, and that's why my opinion or my suspicion about why they caught on more than Mushroomhead was because they were just better than Mushroomhead. Like they infused more varying styles a little bit better, like, and they just pushed the extreme a little bit more, I think. Like they Mushroomhead, their songs were just not, they just didn't meld as well to me, at least in a live setting. And they also, like, their songs didn't sound as varied. Like Slipknot, no two of their songs in my opinion sound the same, with a couple exceptions on Iowa, which just sound like they were phoned in. But like, for the most part, like, that they write like a very varied amount of stuff. But anyway, so Mushroomhead, but they had the masks, and like they did the whole thing with and they were in like camo uniforms. The one cool thing they did was they had a couple bass drums up in the front that the percussionists were playing on.
Yeah.
And they had water, and they had these different color lights shining on it, so it looked like this weird, almost like something you'd see in like a club, like some weird water fest of, like something going on, like. But it was cool because it was all lit up. So like the performance part was cool. The singer, like, and other guys in the band would come out in the crowd and like sing and like get in the pit, and they like interact with the crowds. I thought that was cool. Like people really into that. And there's one point where the singer came down and he was like walking through the crowd, and this chick started like shoving him, and I thought it was maybe like pre set up, or she was like his girlfriend or somebody he knew. But they had like started this shove fest, and then he got back on stage and was like, "Who was that crazy head PE chick that was shoving me?" So I don't know. That was interesting. I thought they were about to fight. So yeah, Mushroomhead was all right, but I was just waiting for head PE, and I was a little disappointed because I was like so far from home. I knew I had a long commute ahead of me after the show, and I had assumed the head PE was playing before Mushroomhead because they were listed second on the ticket, but they headline, which is good because they probably got to play a little bit longer. But I want to go back to the violence thing for a second because I had a point about that. So, and I wasn't surprised that like the security guards were a little uptight. I mean, being Lynchburg is a very conservative area, like kind of, But I was kind of like just surveying the security guys because it was like half a dozen like huge beefy dudes, and then there's one like younger skinnier guy, and I thought he was kind of funny because he, like, every time somebody would start moshing or like a girl would get up on a guy's shoulder or something, he would like smack his forehead and like look all disgruntled and like frustrated and furious with the situation. Like, why are they doing this? Why can't they just behave themselves? Like, and he would like start yelling at the other security guards like they should have been doing something about it. And it's like, to me, if you're gonna have a metal show or a punk show or any kind of alternative music show, and you can't get frustrated at that stuff because it's not like a big secret that shit happens at shows. It's just not, and it's like, I understand the guys just doing their job, and they have a set expectations of that they're supposed to adhere to, and things that they're not supposed to allow. But it's like, metal shows are controlled chaos. Like that's just the way it is. People mosh, and generally it's benign and it's friendly and it's positive and it's like a it's part of the whole atmosphere, and like if you just let it happen, it's usually fine.
How come I got this thing in my head, this view of some little scrawny skinny guy who's like backed up by all
He
these...
wasn't that small. He was just kind of, but he was smaller than the other guys, so he just looked like the little kid that was like, "Hey guys, what you doing?"
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm a security guard too. But yeah, he seemed like, my point is that seemed like he was taking himself too seriously, and he was kind of riling up the other security guards because otherwise they were just kind of hanging out, like watching, making sure things weren't getting out of hand. But like, and we'll talk more about the moshing situation later because there was a thing in the news about Boston cracking out on moshing, but we'll talk about that later. But there were a couple guys that were like thrown out by the scruff of the neck, so to speak. Like this one guy put up such a fight that they had to drag him out by his feet, and like he was holding on to like the door frame. They had to like rip his hands off and like throw him out the door. And I didn't really see what happened with these guys. I only saw them after they started, all the heads started turning, everybody's watching the commotion. But I assume that they were like drunk and disorderly and they were just maybe starting to fight or something. Those guys, frustrated me even more than the security guys that were getting a little overblown about stuff unnecessarily, because it's those like stupid drunk guys that go to metal shows that give metal shows that bad rep. It's not the everybody else that's just having fun and getting a little crazy and getting a little borderline violent, but having a good time and everybody's friendly, and somebody falls down in the pit, everybody rushes in, picks them up. Like it's a good time. It's like, that's the point of the show. But then it's those couple bags that show up and like show up to cause a problem, like, and they just have a big ego and they get super drunk, and then they later on you hear about like, oh, another, how many arrests there were at this punk show or metal show that came through town, and and then of course I'm sure like in the local papers in Lynchburg, this is just conjecture, I don't know if this really happened, but I'm assuming that like the conservative local papers were like picked up on it, were like, see what happens when we allow these demonic bands into our peaceful neighborhood, and all these people get the wrong idea and they get out of order and blah 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 blah. And it's like that wouldn't even be a problem if these guys would just not be dicks. And I don't know how else to put that. It's just like you guys come to these shows and you're giving it a bad name, and stop it. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, have you ever been in an NFL game?
Now, that's one reason that I avoid going to sports games, because people take it way too seriously. It's like, calm down.
Hockey and baseball are different, but like, it's part of it's like a tailgating culture, and you just get a lot of fights, a lot of people looking for fights, stuff like that.
Well, dude, I used to live in Philly, which was, I think, the first football stadium in America to have a full police station and detainment center on premises. Like most of them had it nearby or like downtown, but Philly had the first one that was like there. And I know that when what was that, 2004 maybe, when they were in the Super Bowl? I don't remember what year it was, but when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, like everybody was really worried that if they lost, based on the typical reaction of Philly fans, that there was going to be like rioting, or people were going to like get into fights, and there was going to be stabbings and like vandalism and stolen cars or whatever.
Yeah.
But Philly, apparently that game they played pretty crappy, and people just were, they lost, and people were like, the Philly fans were like, well, they deserve to lose because they sucked. So they didn't have any big acts of violence. That was good. Anyway, back to the show. I want to wrap this up. You can move on to other stuff. But one more thing about Mushroom Head I thought was funny. There was a flyer that was on the tables in the club that was like a Mushroom Head and Slipknot tour flyer, and it was like a Facebook page where they're trying to like lobby or petition to get Slipknot and Mushroom Head to tour together. And they're trying to appeal to like the record companies and the bands to like put their beefs aside. And apparently there's no beefs between the band. That was more of a fan base thing. So I would go for Slipknot. But so lastly, Head PE came up, and dude, they were so good. So you and I that both saw them on the same tour, I think, for their Blackout tour, which was like maybe 2003 or something, like a long time ago.
That's when I came out.
And they were still on what, like was it Jive Records, I think, and so they still had, like, a pretty major deal, and they were still fulfilling that, and that they put out like their weakest album in my opinion, which has grown on me since, but it was still kind of like on the new metal hard rock vibe. Like Jared barely rapped on it, and they still had like two guitarists. I think on that tour they had Sonny from formerly from Snot, who also toured with Seven Dust for a while, was on that tour. So they were still kind of like hitting that scene, that like post new metal like hard rock crowd. And I remember like I thought it was a great show though. Did you had a good time at your show?
It was a great show. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was great, but they were, they were still kind of doing the double guitar, like a little bit bigger sound, bigger band. But since then, obviously, they've been putting all these like more niche albums, like Insomnia and New World Orphans, and then Truth Rising.
They have a new one coming out this year.
Sweet.
And apparently, 3 members of the band have been with the band since the beginning.
Since the beginning? You sure?
The bassist, Jared, and DJ.
But the reason, so it's been like a decade since we've seen them, so I was surprised when they came out because they were just really stripped down. It was just like, it was just Jared, the bassist, one guitar player, a drummer, and the DJ, and I don't know, it was very unassuming. It was just like they just felt like a local punk band, like, I don't know. And Jared had like a big mohawk, because he used to have the big dreads, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but they just like came out and they played, and like they were just awesome. Like they had tons of energy, and Jared was like super, I don't know, he's just like a weird guy. Like he's very idiosyncratic. Like he was making weird faces, and he would like stop in the middle of a song and like make a funny face at the crowd when they would all like sing a chorus back to him or something, and he seemed like almost surprised, or like in general just like it was a great performance from them. Like I dug the new vibe. I loved it that they weren't trying to just do what they've always done, but they were just like keeping it simple, especially after Mushroom Head, which was like just huge performance art kind of craziness, with all the lights and the water and everything and the masks. And like Head PE, they just came out and they just like jammed it out. I was happy because it was such a small crowd that I was able to get like right up front against the bar, so I didn't have to be pressed up against any sweaty people or anything, and that was fun because I haven't had a chance to do that in years. It was interesting the way that they played their songs, because they only played a few songs like as they were on the album, like Renegade. They played Suffa. They played Bartender, which was kind of the way that it was, and there are a couple songs off of Back to Base that were pretty much like the punky kind of vibe stuff. But then other songs like the first actual song on Only in America. They like changed the vibe of it. They did more like a funk, like reggae version of those songs, which was really cool. A couple of them, took me a second to like figure out which song it was they were doing because they like changed the sound. I don't know, like they did a lot of really good like dancey kind of funk versions of stuff that was like, it's a really cool vibe, and then they would like alternate that with like a punk sound. And a lot of the songs they did more of like as a medley. Like they didn't play a lot of full songs. They only played like a few like actual beginning to end songs, and a lot of them they would stop in the middle and go to another one. So I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure why they did that exactly, but it was kind of cool. And then Jared, he just seemed like he was having a great time. Like he was like really enjoying it. He recognized the fact that there was a tiny little crowd, but that everybody was really into it, and he seemed really appreciative of that. He had like a good sense of humor. Like he was just, like I said, he was like making faces and like saying funny stuff. And I mean, he's kind of notorious for like a lot of shit talking on the mic and stuff. And obviously being in Lynchburg, he was saying some of his more anti-authoritarian, like anti-religious stuff. That was ballsy. And but he also seemed really nice and like really gracious that people were there, and that he mentioned that like he appreciated everybody coming out and like buying merch and stuff because it helped him raise his kid. I didn't even know he was a dad, so I can relate to that. Yeah. Oh, and they played a couple Bob Marley songs too. That was cool.
Really?
Yeah, it was a great show. Like, it sucks at Head PE. For a lot of people, they still have that like new metal label where people still think that they're like a rap rock band, but to me they're like a fusion band, and they just kind of do whatever they want. Like, I think they really are like a true punk band because they don't follow any kind of. I mean, how many punk bands play punk music where it's just like, yep, I expect this, and we'll talk about like Anti-Flag a little bit later too, but it's like, okay, here's a punk band, put out another punk album. Like, to me, punk is bigger than just a certain kind of vibe and a certain kind of sound and a certain kind of look. It's like doing whatever you want and not caring about what other people think of you or what like the industry thinks of you or whatever. And I think Hed PE is like they're like
punk's also kind of like a lacking vanity, sort of a minimalism to it.
right, and that's what really came across in their set was like Mushroom Head was like this huge overblown thing, and then Hed PE just like came out and played, and I really felt like actually Jared even said at one point he was like, this is like 100 people here with like 1,000 people capacity. Like this is like kind of show that you guys could have in my backyard. I'd be grilling up a steak and be drinking a beer and like. It really felt like that. It felt like it could have, I don't know. I didn't really feel like there was much separating us from the band. I didn't feel like it was like a big club show. It just felt like it was kind of like a local show. And that I loved. That was a great vibe. It made me kind of miss, being part of a local scene and like playing local gigs and seeing local bands that you really just connect with them on a much more like what I'm trying to say is that I didn't feel like they had to put on a show. I feel like they were just able to play music and like have fun, and like that just resonated with everybody. Everybody was having a good time. It wasn't like they had to put on this front, of like be performers, which is cool too. Like when I saw Machine Head, they were definitely like really calculated. Like everything they did felt like they were really trying to exude a certain stage presence and a professionalism, like, and that was cool too. I appreciated that, but it did feel like I felt very separated from them as musicians. Like they were like giving us a show, like they were up on stage performing for us, where Hed PE felt like we were all just kind of hanging out and like they were just having a good time, and I haven't felt like that at a show in a long time. So
there's two schools of thought that I've found with artists as far as, we're more in the metal scene, more in the scene of the mentality that an artist and the fans and audience that supports them are like together, are one group. There's other mentalities and some other artists. I got into a little argument, kind of a discussion argument about one of my friends who works in the ambulance who loves Radiohead, and I don't know how we got into this, but to him, like, an artist is a musician is an artist, and they do their own thing. And it's stupid. It's stupid to cater to fans. Because you're an artist. You're like a painter. I do what I want. I'm there to make art, and I'm independent of expectations of the social world, of the fans' expectations. I think he was saying like Radiohead was like that. They do. He was putting them up on a pedestal because they have that mentality. They're there to do what they want, which made me not like them anymore. But it's another story. And I gotta say, I don't get anything past OK Computer, and their stuff is depressing to me. But that's my mentality. I used to love them. But what do you think about that, Dan? Compared to these hardcore, the hardcore scene, the old school hardcore scene, it's like you and the fans are one. You're not there to give them a show, to be the artist. You're there. It's experiential. You go to the shows to the experience.
I agree with you completely. I think Radiohead is a great example of that, where they started out like as a band.
Yeah.
Like a rock band, and they became like this art project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are merits to both. I think that like
yeah, neither's right or wrong.
It's one thing because some people really want that feeling of like going to a performance where they're like being fed creativity, where they're not like a part of it. They're not a player or a member. They are a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Or a spectator of that thing, But then there are people like you and me, and this is why I've never been into team sports as like a an outside thing, because I don't feel like I'm part of it, and I think that really just comes down to perspective and your own personal like comfort level and desire for what you're really looking for in terms of like entertainment and an expression.
Mm-hmm.
Where you just some people love to be a spectator. They would never pick up a football, but they love watching it. I prefer to play, like I would rather play football than watch it. I would rather, surf than watch it. Whatever. I think that just really, like a personality thing, and it's just really specific to the person. I don't think either like it's a bad or good thing.
No.
And I will say this for Radiohead, that I think they started to recognize that, or I suspect that they started to recognize that after a while, because like when their last album came out, or I don't know if it's their last one, but one of them called In Rainbows, they actually released all of the I think what happened was they released the album for free for like the first year or 6 months or something. Like you could just go download it for free, and they just gave it away. And then afterwards, you had to buy it, but then they gave you like the track, like the instrumentation tracks separately, and like fans sent in a bunch of remixes. You could remix your own stuff. I think they wanted to like connect with the fans a little bit more because they had become so obscure and and so experimental and so like apart from. And I think that that's what kind of separates like art from rock music in a way, is that rock music is, I don't know, you can't really be a functioning band without having fans. So it's cliche, and it's so without you there is no us, but it's true in a way that if you don't have your fans, like what are you doing? Like it's different because music is experienced to me, whereas a painting or something is observed. Like people didn't give a crap about Picasso or Van Gogh to the level that they do now when they were alive, but that kind of art carries itself in a different way and carries on a different way, whereas like rock music is something that's like interactive, you know at least it is to a person like me, where it's like when I hear music, I want to experience, I want to feel it, and then I want to see it live. But not everybody's like that, so I guess it really just depends on the person. You want to jump into some news?
Go to news.
There's been a ton of stuff happening, and obviously we don't put out the podcast regularly enough to like keep up with all the happenings, but there's been a few things that have happened that I wanted to touch on just because they're exciting or interesting or whatever. I'm just going to go down the list here. We just have like quick discussions about some of this stuff. There was an interesting article or blog posting about Arch Enemy, who I don't really like as really, which is surprising because I love metal chick singers so much, but
there are no walls of Jericho.
No, I agreed. So Arch Enemy, like the singer, came out a couple months ago and just did an interview, and she was talking about how she thinks that they were asking her just about like the state of music and the industry and like digital downloading, which everybody's talking about digital downloading now because it's affecting all these bands, and Arch Enemy put it in a way I thought was interesting. She called it fast food, and it's where like instant gratification, where like people don't have to work for their music anymore, and she was looking at it from the artist point of view too, where like people spend forever like doing these marketing campaigns on the internet, like their biggest thing now, instead of like touring and passing out flyers and being more person to person, is they'll just spend hours on Facebook and Twitter, like, or and doing like studio updates on YouTube and things. She just called that like the fast food mentality of what's happening in music, and I just thought that was interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, definitely simple shortcuts to getting things out, but it's also an alteration. Things are just done differently. I can see wanting to get out of my way the fast food mentality, gratification.
Yeah.
Plus, spending money like that is on every little album that comes out it does suck when you work for a living. But
yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, everybody's got an opinion on it, but relating to that, so did you hear about the Roadrunner layoffs?
No.
So Roadrunner Records is doing like global layoffs and they're downsizing like in a huge way and like consolidating because, and I guess it was kind of like a surprise, like people didn't see it coming, and a bunch of artists responded to it, like Rob Flynn, people, and Des Farah, or whatever his name is, from Devil Driver, and like a lot of Roadrunner artists responded to it, and a lot of people were really pissed off. Oh, the guy from Trivium had a lot of shit to say. He was like really upset, with like, he was like, oh, I have all these friends that helped me get where I am now, and now they're out of work, and how they're going to feed their kids and blah blah blah. And he was like kind of spitting fire. But I think it's a sign of the times, and the record industry, everybody keeps saying is dead anyway. I don't know why it was such a surprise that and metal doesn't seem to be as much in the forefront of mainstream anyway, so and Roadrunner isn't a metal label as much anymore. Like they were like the new metal label, and now they're like, they have a lot of those bands still, but they've gone over, like they have like, I think they have like some folk bands, they have some like alternative bands, they have like hard rock, and they have like other stuff that's not even close to what you would think would be on Roadrunner.
So they diversified.
Yeah, which was smart, but it sounds like at the same time, like all over the world, like they're closing offices and laying off people and like consolidating jobs, and so that sucks, because I just brought that up because Roadrunner, was such a huge I mean, like, how many bands were on Roadrunner that we love? Biohazard, Sepultura, Soulfly, Cold Chamber, Devil Driver, Slipknot, like all those bands, from our high school years, like that was all Roadrunner, and I think it's sad in a way that they're having to do what because they're probably going to go under. You don't usually in the business world you don't see a company like do a huge uh layoff and restructuring and then come out on top, except for maybe like Kmart did it, but
Hmm.
not with the way music's going. So
Hard industry to make money and survive in.
especially now. But you know what? I still believe though that if bands continue to put out, I'm gonna use Head PE as an example since we're talking about them. I mean, I didn't buy a T-shirt because we're not in a good financial uh, situation right now, just because of circumstantial. But if I had the available cash, I definitely would have bought a T-shirt just to support them. Not even because I need a T-shirt, but like I want to support them. Like I am fine, but I did buy a ticket to their show, and I drove. Oh, I don't know, like 2.5 hours to go see them, which was a tank of gas, and um, obviously I'm invested in that band. Like and they're not the only one. I drove 2 hours to go see Machine Head. I bought a ticket to their show. Like I want those bands to keep going. I want them to keep creating. I want them to keep giving me stuff that I love too. It's like, and I think if bands they continue to be honest and they continue to be, like faithful to their fans and like show their fans respect and not just try to get, like the quick fix and the instant, short term money what I'm trying to say, like the short term income where it's like let's get big on one single right now and like like shine for all we're worth in our 15 minutes and then burn out, nobody will care about us. Like I think the bands just keep being honest and keep being have integrity. Like I'll keep supporting them, and I think people will in some form or fashion. It might not be through record companies, but who cares? Like they were a middleman anyway. Like bands with the internet, bands have shown that they can publicize and market and book and like run their own show. They don't need record companies anymore. So or at least not the big conglomerate ones. They like a lot of these small record companies do just fine distributing their material. So
Oh yeah.
like I think Heavy is a good example. I think a lot of these bands that we were like Spineshank's coming back. We'll talk about them in a second. Like bands can do it. They just have to rethink about the way they're going to do it. And that's why I don't think digital downloading is going to destroy the industry. I think it's just changing it. And I think bands just have to adapt, and that's just reality. So, all right, you want to move on?
Let's move on.
All right, real quick. So, Boston. This is another article that was big in the music sphere for a while. Boston started cracking down specifically on moshing in clubs, and it was a big deal. There's been a lot of discussion about it out there. People can go find it, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. I just wanted to bring it up because of what I experienced at the Head PE show, where they did allow moshing until it got out of hand, and then they started throwing people out, and that just like riled them up and incited them more. And I think that was a mistake. And I mean, what do you think? Do you think moshing like incites violence and should be banned, or do you think it's something that should be allowed to happen?
I feel like in the past like decade, like they've been like cracking down on moshing big time. It's like the man has gotten afraid of switching the liability, and I feel like more and more like the simple moshing has been like frowned upon in clubs more and more. It's like that's one reason kids are growing up not mosh anymore, because they're just taught not to, because no one, the man is hard on it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors at play, like you said. Like some of it's generational, some of it's it depends on your perspective, like what you think. If you think it's it's coming from a place of violence, or if it's coming from a whatever. But I just think that I think some of this, like I said, some of the stuff comes with the territory. And again, I think it like these people that are, I don't know, in control of the situation, so to speak, like the people that run the clubs and set the rules, and the police, like they don't understand what they're dealing with. And if when you don't understand what you're dealing with, how can you seek to control it? It's like I think they don't understand the music. They like we've talked about a lot. Like they see metal as like this whatever this stupid Neanderthal primal dumb thing that like just is all about violence and anger and hate and Satan. That's my assumption, at least from their perspective, and that they don't. But that's evidenced by the fact that they don't know how to handle it when like people start moshing in a club, and they're like, "Don't crowd surfing, no moshing, like keep your feet on the floor," and like that's not going to happen. It's the same thing. Like I mean, relate to my teacher experience a little bit when we have kids that are like 11 or 12 years old, and we tell them to sit up straight and listen and learn all day long. Like when you tell a kid to do that, you are showing that you don't understand the way a kid works, because kids are both not physically or mentally developed enough to be able to sit for hours on end and pay attention and focus on one thing. They can't do it. And it's the same thing like in a metal show. Like metal does not lend itself to calm response. Like it is hits at a very emotional primal part of the human condition. It's like human nature, and part of human nature is anger and violent tendencies, and that's why to me moshing is a very safe, generally safe and acceptable expression or response to that music, because it's people allowing themselves, like Rob Flynn's talked about it at the show. I thought he put it really well. He's like, we're all here together to get this stuff out because it's in us, and if it gets pent up, it becomes worse. It becomes bad. But if you get it out in a positive way, like through metal music, then you're it's cathartic. You're healing yourself, and you're bettering yourself. And I think that's part of what moshing is. And obviously there are always people that are going to take it too far and be stupid and treat it without respect. But for the most part, in general, people don't. People do respect it, and they do it for a specific reason. And it's the authorities that don't understand that aspect of it, so they try to like clamp down on it and control it, and then this whole Boston thing happens. And the reason that it happened, by the way, was because a kid got really hurt in a pit, and afterwards he said, even though he had some permanent like nerve damage and stuff, and he was going to be messed up for life, but he said, I did that. I made the choice to go into that pit. I knew what the consequences could be, and I was okay with that. And I'm not blaming the people that knocked me down or whatever. I'm not blaming anybody. He's like, I still would have gone in and did it again even if I knew it was going to happen. So it's like, to me, it totally negates the whole idea of like having to like control it, because that's just stupid. So.
Yes, but you gotta realize how rock and roll is meant to scare people, meant to make the man a little uncomfortable, meant to ruffle his feathers. So it is said the more holy, the more moral, holy, controlled, whatever a person is, the more they're keeping certain parts of themselves under wraps that can come out in very covert ways. It scares the average person, man, to see this metal stuff and this like instinctual display of anger and aggression. It's not. The society is built to keep certain expressions and emotions and things from being let out, because society is scared to death of the whole of human experience. And metal likes to dwell, and hard rock likes to dwell on that part of that shadow of human experience that average civilized society is afraid of. I have heard that we actually are human beings. I don't want to get that clear, but human beings actually, as we are more like, we think we're civilized, but in a way we are really like animals that live instinctually, that are civilized to act like we're human beings. That's not our widest potential. I'm into a lot of very positive psychologies, but the whole like we're this great society of well-rounded people is BS, and metal exposes that lie that society tells itself. Modern society in general, I'm talking about. I'm really scared of it. And it ruffles a man's feathers. He doesn't like to see that, so he's going to fight it. He's going to, no, these bad, evil things, yeah. That's the reason I love it.
So you're saying this is kind of a natural way of things. Is that it's just
Hey, you can't logically explain metal to the man or to the average non-metal loving person.
I just did, dude.
You're not. It's not logical. It functions on a level of emotion expression that is not logical, and the modern man is afraid of that. We're so emotionally repressed, especially the dark emotion, that we are afraid of it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It does not surprise me one bit that things like moshing are so I guess repressed or whatever.
Frowned upon.
Violence these days, yeah.
All right, let's talk about some albums that came out recently. I don't think we'll have time to get to all of them, but we haven't done an album review in a while, so let's see. So like, I gotta put a disclaimer in here that none of these are necessarily extremely recent albums, but I like to put the argument out there that it's one thing to read a review of something, days or even before it comes out to anticipate, if you want to get it or not, or if you think it's going to be good. But music is art, and sometimes art takes longer than a week to digest and to really understand and to really connect with and experience fully. So I think it's okay to review an album that's like month old, 6 months old, even a year old, because there are some albums that I've had that I got and I shrugged aside because I thought it was meh at first, and then like years later I came back to it and was like, this is amazing, So let's talk about let's start with Soulfly. So Soulfly put out Enslaved, and what'd you think?
I didn't like it first, and it's still good. It was okay. It's pretty good. I liked it a bit better than the two before it.
Conquer?
Two before were just kind of, they were heavier, but it's just the songs were better than like the ones, like Prophecy and not Prophecy and Dark Ages were very good albums.
Ditto.
The two after were like, oh, it's really heavy, and where's the great songs your older albums had on it? I mean, but this one was a bit better. I was through the game in the right mood or something, but it's pretty good.
Well, it was interesting. I don't know if I sent these to you. I meant to if I did. If I didn't, but Max did like a 4-part video series or interview about each album. Like he just talked about like his feelings and thoughts and behind the scenes stuff of each Soulfly album.
Yeah.
All the way up to Enslaved, which I thought was and it was really interesting. Like there's a lot of stuff I've assumed about Max over the years that I never really knew for sure, but I just assumed from the material he was putting out and everything. And it was interesting to hear him talk about some of this stuff. Like the first thing that was really interesting was that he talked about God and his spirituality, and he said like unequivocally that he's not Christian or Catholic, which I'm super surprised about because he's Brazilian, and I just assumed he was Catholic because of that. And he's so preachy about God in his album, and I think even in Enslaved, like he talks about Jesus, but he said that he doesn't believe in a Christian or Judeo-Christian God. He says that he sees God as like a different kind of thing, a different energy, or I don't remember exactly what his quote was, but that surprised the heck out of me. Did you know that?
No, he had a psalm on the first album, and the inside cover, didn't he?
Right. So I mean, obviously he's got to pull some kind of his spirituality from a religious standpoint, but he said that the God that he talks about is not like the Judeo-Christian idea of God. So he didn't like elaborate too much on that, but I just thought that was really interesting, and it kind of makes me like rethink. I just kind of shrugged that part of him off as like, well, he's just really Catholic because he was brought up that way, and even though he's into like metal and dark stuff and he likes death metal, he's still, he is still a Catholic, person, and that's the God that he's talking about. But if that's not the case, I just think that kind of makes me, I don't know, have a different perspective on his music, especially the more spiritual stuff that he mentions in his songs. So um, he a couple other things about those videos real quick that I thought was interesting that he talked about. There was, I mean, you got to go watch them. Like, you can find them on YouTube. Just like search for Max like Roadrunner album interview or something like that. You'll find them on there. But he talks about like the Bloodbath and Beyond song on Omen was actually created because he said he was on tour and he was driving by a Bed Bath and Beyond and it was like a pun. He's like, oh look, there's Bloodbath and Beyond, ha ha ha, and he was like, hey, that's a good idea for a song. I'm just like, I don't even know how to feel about that. I'm like, okay, whatever inspiration strikes, I guess. But but yeah, I like in general from the videos, like I realized that I've really oversimplified my take on like his what he's doing with his stuff because the way he talks about each album, he really talked about him like as a unique little baby of his. Like he really put a lot of he's really says that he put a lot of time and thought and into kind of creating each one in its own unique thing. And I'm surprised by that because of all the crap that I've talked about. Like basically like once he hit Prophecy, he was like it just seemed like he's been on this thrash kick, and he's starting Soulfly seemed like he was more on a new metal kick, like or even Roots, before. And I just assumed that he was just kind of like going with trends and stuff, but I don't know. It seems like he seems like the way he was talking about it, he was really aware of each album and like why he made it the way he did. Like he didn't seem like he was just kind of absentmindedly just like I don't know, just going along with the flavor of the moment. It seemed like he was really intentional about, why the first couple Soulfly albums were so, new metal-ish. Like he was very clear about that. And then he said that Soulfly 3 is his least favorite album. He said he was phoning that one in, which that's one of my favorites of theirs. So I think that's interesting. But he said that he likes some songs in there. But he said as an album he felt like he could have done better, and he apologized that that it wasn't up to his standards. So I thought that was interesting. But he also said though that, in going along with what you were saying about like the last few Soulfly albums, is he said that he thought that he thought that Omen was also kind of a lazy album because he said he thought it didn't sound very different than Conquer, which I agree with completely.
Yeah.
And that's one reason like I've barely listened to Omen because it just didn't bring anything new to the table. It was just sort of like I don't know, it just felt like a lazy album. Like there just wasn't much in it. And he admitted to it. He was like, Omen was a continuation of Conquer, and I didn't really know what I was going with that, and I just kind of put out a Soulfly album just because I felt like I should. But he's like I would have done more if I could go back and do it again. And that's why he said Enslaved. He made an intentional effort to like bend it more towards death metal because he wanted to really. He said he felt inspired for the first time in a long time. He said that all of his albums came out of a place of inspiration. Like he said, he's never made an album just because, with the exception of like 3 and Omen were a little bit less inspired. But so I liked Enslaved. It surprised me because of how like bland I thought stuff was getting with Conquer and Omen, and how kind of like repetitive and just predictable I thought his stuff was becoming. But Enslaved surprised me because I think Enslaved is like the perfect like conglomeration of everything that he's done so far, because it has like some of his like heaviest and most brutal stuff, but it also has some of his most like groovy parts to it. Like the songs are great because there's like some of them are super fast and like super crazy and like real shreddy, and then they'll have these like really groovy like almost more like old Soulfly, like Primitive and Prophecy kind of groovy like choruses and like breakdowns and stuff. And there's a lot more like of the traditional like Brazilian kind of drumming and like the other like Brazilian instruments and things on there that he's used before. So it felt more like a real Soulfly album, not just Max like trying to go thrash. Like it felt like the vibe, to me the vibe was more like a Soulfly album than it's been for a while, and I appreciated that. And I thought that the song with Dez is like pretty solid. I mean, obviously I think it could have been better in some ways. Like the songs could have been a little tighter. Some of them could have been a little bit more. I don't know. I just like his creativity on Roots and the first Soulfly album. Still blow my mind. Like just the stuff like the insanity and like the just the cool. Every song sounds different, you know. Like I don't think Enslaved was that good, but I think it's the best album they've put out since Dark Ages, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I've been reinvigorated a little bit back towards the Soulfly camp. So
I have to just listen to it again. I liked it. I just must not have been in a mood for it when I listened to it.
yeah. Well, as I said, like listen when you listen to it again, listen to it like for the groove, and I think you'll be surprised because the last couple albums didn't have the old Soulfly groove, which I miss. But Enslaved brought it back a little bit. So all right, let's talk about. I think we can get through a couple of these albums pretty quickly because there's not tons to say about it. Like new Lamb of God Resolution. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've only listened to one time through so far, but I haven't listened to a lot of metal or much music much recently, actually. But I liked it. I liked it. I liked the last one. Is almost my favorite one, Wrath.
Wrath.
And it follows Wrath, and songs pretty tight. It's just a lot of songs. So you get to about middle, two-thirds, three-quarters of the way through, and the songs blend a bit, but
Yeah.
all in all, it's good. It's fully Lamb of God. It's good.
I feel the same way. I thought it was solid and a little long, and otherwise like a good Lamb of God album. There wasn't really anything new or mind blowing about it, but sometimes like you just need some good thrash, you know.
Yeah.
So thank God we have Lamb of God. I felt the same way about the new Anti-Flag too. The General Strike. Like I thought it was good, but it just didn't really stand out as anything special.
Yeah.
Did you listen to it?
I haven't, no.
Oh well.
I don't listen to them much anymore.
I don't know. I feel like Anti-Flag is one of those bands. It's like they've created a expectation for themselves, and now they can't break from it. It's like we're this political angry punk band, so now we have to make every album has to be like a angry political album, and that's fine, but I just feel like they've kind of dug a little bit of a hole for themselves. And but the album was it's solid. It's got some good songs on it, and like the I forgot the name of the song now, but there's a song that they put the video out for where it's sort of like a Guantanamo Bay situation where they're like being beaten. Have you seen the video? But they're being like beaten and tortured by Muppets.
No.
It's funny. Yeah, go check it out. I forgot the name of the song is, but it's on the General Strike. You can find it. Oh, the only other one I really wanted to touch on. I mean, the other I had on my list, Blue October, which came out a while ago. I think it's been almost a year, but Blue October is one of those bands that it takes me a while to really digest their albums, and I like the last one. It's called Any Man in America, right?
Yeah.
Do you like it? Has it stuck with you?
I liked it. It was like really about the theme of him losing the custody of his child and everything, and
Yeah.
woman, but it was really good. I didn't really like the last one very much.
See, I love their last one. I liked it almost more than Foiled.
No, I can't get into more than four. But I liked it. I mean, especially that first song sticks in my head a lot.
I thought it was interesting that he did it like a hip hop song. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
One thing I really like about Blue October, and I think I'll always be interested in them, because like their first couple albums I just can't get into because they just felt like kind of, I don't know, just like generic hard rock with a violinist. But then Foil came out and they showed that they could like write really, really catchy but like intricate and like really deep songs that just like are like multi-layered and like super interesting, and like you don't quite get it the first time around.
No.
And I think that they're doing a really good job of that. Like the latest one got some flack for being kind of single subject having a single subject about his ex-wife and everything and the kid.
Yeah.
But I mean, who's to say? Like a work of art oftentimes comes from inspiration, and I think a lot of artists would benefit from taking a listen to some of like albums that have to do with a specific thing, because I mean, if you're talking about an album, to me, like an album is supposed to be a cohesive piece of work. It's like when you write a bunch of songs over like the course of several years, and there's lots of albums that you could look at like that, like where it's just a bunch of songs that they just throw together and then release as one thing. It doesn't really hold together as well because it's not an album. It's a whatever. It's a compilation of like songs that they made. But Blue October is really good about making an album that feels like it was written for a purpose at a certain time that reflects a certain inspiration, you know.
Yeah.
So, but then again, they also, they toyed with some new genres, like the hip hop thing, and they brought in. And I'm always interested to hear how they're gonna like integrate their violinist. It's not always the same thing. Like they do interesting like staccato, and it's sometimes it's more ambient like background, and sometimes it's really forefront. I think that's really cool.
Well, the guy who plays violin is a guy who can play. He's like a instrument aficionado. Like he can play like all the instruments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I heard that about him.
Cool. The only other album that I really wanted to touch on, and this one's a little bit older too, but is the newer Incubus album, which is called If Not Now, When. Have you listened to it?
I did, and maybe twice.
What did you think?
I liked it. And I haven't been much of an Incubus fan since Make Yourself, actually. Honestly, I had not. I don't even own Morning View. I don't even have that on my iPod. I think I need their old stuff too back on my iPod. I don't know where it all went. I really have to fill in the gaps their stuff beforehand. I liked it. It was really emotional without being like emo emotional. It was just like this. A lot of songs had just like this vibe that were like, I don't know. It showed you can have this like very expressed emotional vibe to the music without being melodramatic. Wussy. It was just really good.
I want to compare it to something real quick, even though. All right, I want to say this about Incubus before I really talk about the album, is that Incubus was a band that taught me to give bands a chance and a break, because a lot of times like when bands would put out a new album, they're like hardcore fans would immediately say that it sucks because it wasn't exactly what they put out last time,
Yeah.
And I was like that for a while about a lot of bands. Like I really wanted them to put out part 2 of whatever their last album was because I love that album so much, whatever it was. But after because I love Science and I loved Make Yourself, and then Morning View came out and it was really different, but I still liked it. And then Crow Left of the Murder, and at that point I was like, I still liked what they did, but I was like, damn it, why can't they just put out another Science? Like I love Science so much, like just do something like that again, please. But they kept going like less away from, like way away from the funk, and like they kept getting less and less hard, and they were doing more like introspective, softer stuff,
yeah,
what have you. And I was like, I really like Science and Make Yourself, and they were part of that, like that, they were lumped in with nu metal for a while, and I wanted that. I just felt like I wanted that back until I finally realized, and I started applying this to all of the music I listened to, and it really opened my mind, was that Incubus is a band, unlike like Soulfly or Hatebreed or Korn for a while until they did dubstep, that they're a band that are never going to put out the same album twice, that they're going to do something new every time, because they really are a band that values the album as an art format, not just like, okay, we wrote this collection of songs, we're going to put it out now. It's like we locked ourselves in a room, we bought a beach house in Malibu or whatever they did for that album, and they're like, this is what we're going for. Like, we've been inspired to do this, and we're gonna make this kind of vibe, and this is gonna be our album. And like, I realized that like they're gonna do something different every album, and now I've learned, instead of to expect something from them, I just anticipate whatever it is they're gonna put out. And I feel like that, about like the Deftones now. I feel like that about most bands that I listen to. Instead of like wanting them to do what they used to do, I want them to just do whatever they're gonna do honestly. And that's why I approached the new Incubus album, even though to me it's like way different than, like, to me they've always had like one song on their albums that's like the new album, you know what I mean, where it's like more of like a love song, and it's like a little bit more toned down. It doesn't have a lot of like the guitar is not the forefront of the song. It's a little bit more beat driven, you know what I mean? Like every album has at least one song that's like a little bit like songs like Drive. But this new album is like all like that. Like they just were like, okay, forget it. We're not gonna do any more like riff based, like harder guitar stuff. We're gonna do beat, like it's really beat driven. It's very like the percussion to me is like almost on the same level as Brandon, and the guitar is like way more just kind of like a background, just supportive to the, or it's like driving the melody, but it's not driving like the actual meat of the song.
Yeah.
The meat that's coming from Brandon, and then the bass and the percussion, like the rhythm section is really like making these songs. And that's what I found really interesting about it, was that like they just went for a totally different direction than they've ever done for an album. And I just thought it was really cool. And I don't really know what kind of response it got from the larger community, but I think they're doing pretty well because their tours are selling out pretty fast. Because I tried to go to one of their shows and it was sold out.
Really?
In Richmond. So
Happy still a fan.
yeah, I think they're still pretty popular, so good for them. But I wanted to compare, if not now, when, to Linkin Park's last album. And I could go on about Linkin Park forever, but we'll talk about them when we do. Let's do an episode sometime about new metal specifically. Let's just like get it all out of our system. Let's talk about new metal and just do that. But the reason that I find, even though like the vibe of the album is totally different and the sounds of the album are different, but I think, if not now, when, and then what is it? Is it 1,000 Suns or 10,000 Suns or whatever the number is? I found those albums really similar partially because of that whole thing I just said about them like putting out something completely different than they've ever done and unexpectedly so, but also because they're both, all the songs on both albums build, like they're based around the way that they build, or the way that the songs catch you is not necessarily from the initial kind of structure and melody of the song, but it's because of the way that it builds into a bigger song than it started out as. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Both albums are full of songs that like start really small, and little by little they build up. And sometimes like there's a couple songs on the Incubus album that never explode, like never climax. Like they like rise and fall like these waves, but they never crest. Especially like that first song on the new Incubus album is like it kind of builds you up, and you feel like something bigger is going to happen, and then it brings it back down. It's like, it's very calculated to me to like kind of, like rein in those. It's like they sat down and said, we don't really want to go big. We want to keep things small, but we still want to be really emotional. And then of course the Linkin Park album is like way bigger, but they did the same kind of thing. Like they brought the guitar to the background. It's way beat driven. Like every song is like all about the percussion, the beat. And there's only like one song in there where what's his name, Chester, I think, the singer, screams. Like otherwise, like it's not really an aggressive album at all. It's like way more like, I don't know. It's like a thinking man's new metal or something. Like I just thought that it's unfortunate that Linkin Park has a bad name in some books for being like this just new metal band, but I think they
how were they for us two for the longest time? They were the weak, wussy, radio selling new, watered down new metal band.
Yeah, they were everything that I hated about new metal was Linkin Park. They represented all of it.
But I don't know, the third and fourth album is fantastic. I was like almost annoyed that I liked stuff from the third album. Like, damn it, I like this. What's wrong with me?
I know, I was pissed off too. I was like, songs like God, I can't remember song names ever. I'm so horrible with song names, but whatever, like the soft songs that they had. I was like, oh my God, I really like this.
Yeah.
Damn it, no, you can't like this. You're not allowed to. It's Linkin Park, and then
Linkin Park, you can't like this.
But we can talk more about Linkin Park later. But I just wanted to compare those two albums because I thought like just that specific thing about them, like the way that they changed their sound but still are the same band. Both albums kind of had that, and I just found that was an interesting similarity, and I think it worked really well for both albums. Like I think both bands matured a lot. They're very smart the way that they're doing what they're doing, and I think they're going to live on longer than bands, like a lot of their contemporaries, because they're making art. They're not just churning out crap.
Again, the two artists we're talking about, I guess we're touring together.
Well, who's touring together?
The two artists we've been just talking about.
They are?
Yeah.
Wait, did you say Linkin Park and Incubus are touring together?
Yeah, they're going to tour together.
Are there any dates yet?
I don't know. Honda Civic Tour, great. Now tours are named after a product, great.
Dude, that's awesome. I'd pay pretty big money to go see that. since you broke that upcoming, let's talk about some more upcoming stuff real quick.
Yeah, and I got one thing real quick. Linkin Park is coming out June 26th.
Oh, sweet. I haven't heard anything from it yet. One thing I do know is I read an interview with Chester, or maybe it was the other guy, Fort Minor. I always forget his name, but I read an interview with Linkin Park, and they said that they tried as hard as they could to not do anything close to nu metal. They want to separate themselves completely from that, so we'll see.
Cool.
All right, let's talk about some other upcoming stuff really quick so we can wrap this up because it's getting late and it's going long. All right, upcoming is a new Fear Factory album. Pretty excited because I love Mechanize, even though it's nothing new. And I read a review on the PRP, and they said the same thing, that it's nothing new, but it's still good. So I don't really want anything new from Fear Factory right now. I like what they're doing, and I want them to keep doing that. So yeah. Also, Deftones have entered the studio. So has VOD. And Spineshank is also finishing up their new album, so there's some stuff coming out, man. Stuff that I'm excited about.
Oh.
Actually, VOD, we've been waiting on that for so long, and now it's like every other day there's like a new thing released. And I think the last one was that they just titled it, and I forgot what it was, but just the fact that they've titled the album means that it's gonna be coming out soon. So
Yep.
yeah, so good stuff coming up. Also upcoming, something that you and I both have tickets to, is a System of a Down Deftones tour. We're going to be seeing them in August in Washington, D.C. And it's System headlining, Deftones, and then I don't remember who the other, maybe they haven't released it yet, but this, so we will definitely podcast about that when that happens. I'm really stoked for that. Oh, and lastly, In This Moment is also finishing up the new album. And did you know that they lost 2 members?
No. Really?
Yeah, since we saw them less than a year ago, they lost their, I think it was a drummer and a guitarist, and they've replaced them. So, but they're and apparently it was kind of a dark thing. I mean, I've read, like, I follow Maria Brink like almost obsessively. I'm not ashamed to say, but she said that this was like a big inspiration for her. It was like a really dark time. Like, she thought the band might stop, and she was really upset. And then she was, like, I'm not gonna let this stop me. And then she decided to go ahead and start the new album, and then they got the new members, and she said she really felt like the fire was lit, and she's super excited, and she's like tweeting about it all the time. So hell yeah, there's a new song, like they record a live version of the song called Blood. I think the album's called Blood too, so you can check that out.
Awesome.
Oh well, and this should have been mentioned earlier, but another thing in the news was that Pantera put out apparently like their lost song, which is called Piss. You've heard it, right?
Yeah.
To me, I still haven't been able to locate the songs. I haven't had Pantera on my iPod recently, but I know that's a blasphemy. But I just I have way too many gigs of music to keep on my freaking 8 gig iPhone. So, but there's like the verse of Piss is the same exact verse or chorus from a song I think is on Far Beyond Driven. And I think there's a reason that this was a lost track, was because it started out as a different, or I think this was the original version of whatever song, and then they rewrote it for a later album, but then the original song had a different chorus, so they just, I don't know. I'm not disappointed, but I'm just kind of like, really, guys? Like, you're gonna release a song that sounds almost identical to another song and say it was a new song?
That's how it originally was, man. I mean, a Thrones of Rejection, right? Isn't that the...
Is that what it was? Okay, I gotta go listen to it. But I swear, like...
That's what they... I mean, that was the original song. It's cool to hear something different, but it'd be cool... Do they have anything else missing? That'd be cool to hear, but...
They haven't really said... I mean, maybe this is what they're setting us up for, is more... Because they just did the 20th anniversary, that's why they remastered Piss, was so they could put it on Volga Display... reissue 20-year anniversary or whatever, but maybe they'll do it again. That bugs me when bands do that, like, oh, we had this lost song. I mean, but Pantera's not even a band anymore. They're more of like a business partnership or something, like, so I don't know. But I mean, it's cool, hearing something that was kind of new from Pantera. So I'm just glad Pantera is still part of the media.
Well, that song was kind of like it seemed really mismatched. You had that like breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
You had like the other part of the song.
I agree completely. Which is probably why they rewrote it for Throws of Rejection or whatever, was because they were like, oh, this song's okay, but we like this part, but we don't need the other part, so let's just rewrite it.
Yeah.
I bet you. I'm almost willing to put money on that. That's what happened. But I've been sitting on this for a while. I just want one more thing I want to mention to wrap up the podcast is that on our first episode, I remember railing about Twitter, and that Twitter was a great way to follow news and like other stuff. Like I was following all my music news on Twitter and things, and then I discovered Google Reader, and there's lots of other readers out there that if you're into the blogosphere of whatever area of blogs you're into, like Dave and I are in a lot of nutrition and health blogs, and I like a lot of music blogs, and I find blogging to be a very good way to keep up with news and articles and things, as opposed to like I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, I like blogs because they're easily updated and they're easily fixed if there's like something's wrong. As opposed to like a paper. If you read in the paper and you read a news article and then they have something wrong in there, they have to wait till the next issue or the next week or whatever, or the next publication for them to fix it, or retract it or whatever. But blogs, are instantaneous. And then if you follow them on a feed like a Google Reader, then you have one-stop shop to go read all of the stuff that you want to keep up with, and it's updated instantaneously. And I like it better than Twitter because you can, in my opinion, you can organize it a little bit more. You can organize it better, and you can organize it by folders, so you can look at each blog separately. My Twitter feed, even though I put like all my news items in a list, like my music news tweets that I followed, they were all what's the word? They were scattered throughout the list of like, PRP would be scattered throughout Blabbermouth, posts and whatnot. So it was hard for me to like follow just one at a time. But so I'm take back what I said in the first episode about Twitter being good. I'm putting my money on Google Reader now as a good way to follow blogs and podcasts and news items and everything else that is on an RSS feed. So. For this episode's song pick, I'm going to do another blast from the past. This is a song by Margret Heater, who was a Baltimore, Maryland band from about 1997 or 8 to about 2003. And even though my high school band Minion never actually played with them, we were part of a similar kind of alt metal, hardcore, local indie metal scene that was happening around the Baltimore area at the time. I actually met the guitarist originally working with him at Circuit City back in Maryland, and then later he was working at Master Musicians, which was a local music store, which I don't think exists anymore. My brother and I were taking our respective music lessons there and saw him there, and I heard a band playing on the PA in the store, and I asked him, I thought they sounded kind of familiar, they sounded kind of awesome, and I asked him who it was, and he's like, oh yeah, this is my band. And the reason that they thought they sounded kind of familiar was because they kind of had a little tinge of Deftones to them. And then the first time I saw them play, their singer was wearing that classic Deftones windbreaker that Jay mentioned back in episode 7 that he had bought, and that was like circa 1997. So these guys were always really cool to us, and they were always really awesome live. Definitely were kind of part of that turn of the century alt metal scene, but they never really fit into one niche that you couldn't really pin them down as one thing. They even covered their own kind of version of a Depeche Mode song, Enjoy the Silence. That was their big kind of hit in the area. That was that song that every band has that they have to close with, kind of like their Enter Sandman, I guess. Their guitarist that I had worked with at Circus City also played cello, and they were a big fan of doing the overlapping vocals and kind of layering and doing a little bit more intricate stuff with their sound. So went before their time, and I really miss them, and I know that they had been on the verge of greatness, so it's too bad. But this is off their first album, which was independently produced, and their first album was called Manifest. And again, this is a song by Margret Heater, and the song is called Mannequin. Enjoy. The main website for this podcast is bumusiccast.wordpress.com. Please leave us feedback there in the comments section, or please email us at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at breathingunder, but I'm only really going to post when we have a new episode available. Other than that, there's not going to be much other web presence for now. I'm just trying to keep things simple. So if you need to contact us, WordPress or email is probably the best bet.
All views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the persons expressing them and have no relation to the companies, artists, or bands discussed.
In addition, the participants of this podcast claim no rights or ownership of the musical media, songs, sound clips, etc. presented in this podcast, which are solely for promotional purposes. If there are any issues with any content presented in this podcast, please contact us and we'd be happy to take care of it.
So please do not sue us or be a hater.
Thanks for listening.